What if the legacy you've spent your life building was built on a lie? Imagine walking down a cold Brooklyn street, your mind still on boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, when you see four little girls selling flowers, identical, brown hair, emerald eyes, and in a split second you realize they look exactly like your ex-wife, and strangely enough, they look just like you. That's exactly what happened to Julian Carrington, a powerful media mogul who thought he was infertile until he locked eyes with four strangers and saw everything he'd lost right in front of him. But what if the real betrayal came not from the woman he'd thrown out 10 years ago, but from the person he trusted most? This story features wrongful imprisonment, hidden letters, a corrupt sister, and a father fighting not only for redemption, but for the daughters he never knew he had. How far would you go to make things right if you were 10 years behind? If stories of second chances, emotional twists, and buried truths resonate with you, subscribe to our channel now and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. And let us know in the comments, do you believe people can really change after a lifetime of mistakes? We'd love to hear your thoughts. The winter air bit through the collar of Julian Carrington's overcoat as he stepped out of his chauffeured SUV onto the busy edge of Fifth Avenue. His driver, Warren, looked back through the tinted glass. "Sir, the tunnel's faster. Midtown's a nightmare." Julian shook his head, smoothing down his tailored lapel. "I'll walk." "But the Chen call, they can wait." He shut the door with a quiet finality. The streets buzzed around him. Horns, sirens, pedestrians in rush-hour migration. Above it all loomed the silhouette of Carrington Tower, its mirrored glass swallowing the city skyline. He had just signed a merger worth $1.4 billion, a global expansion into digital syndication. By every measurable standard, he had won. So why did he feel like something was missing? He passed a window where televisions displayed his face. Julian Carrington secures historic media deal. He looked away, suddenly repulsed. The chill in the wind seeped deeper than bone. At the corner of DeKalb and Flatbush, a group of children caught Julian's eye. He would have walked past them, he often did, but these weren't the usual flower hawkers. They were too familiar. Four girls stood in mismatched coats, cheeks pink with cold, their small hands clutched. Bouquets of hand-tied carnations and daisies. A cardboard sign read, "Hope in Bloom, $5. They were identical. Auburn hair, green eyes, faces carved from the same mold, Marisol's mold. Julian froze mid-step. One of the girls, taller, more serious, caught his stare. She nudged her sister. Soon all four were looking at him with expressions that curled something long dead in his chest. "Would you like to buy some flowers, sir?" the tallest asked. Her voice, there was music in it, not unlike Marisol's when she used to hum in the early mornings, barefoot in their old kitchen. Julian's throat closed. He couldn't breathe. "What's your name?" he asked hoarsely. "I'm Elia. These are Sage, Mira, and Luna." His watch beeped. He was late for a board meeting, but he couldn't move. Then a bus roared past, and when he looked again, they were gone, swallowed by the city. Back at Carrington Tower, Julian shut his office door and pressed his forehead against the cold glass wall overlooking the skyline. 10 years ago, Marisol had stood in this very room, her hands trembling on her stomach, her voice thick with emotion. "It's a miracle, Julian. The doctors were wrong. I'm pregnant, our baby." "No," he had said, "that's not possible." He remembered her expression. Not just pain, betrayal. "You'd rather believe a diagnosis than your own wife. I'd rather believe science than desperation." She had left that night, her wedding ring left on the granite desk. He never heard from her again. Or, so he thought. Julian turned from the window, opened a drawer, pulled out a small wooden box he hadn't touched in years. Inside, one photograph, Marisol on their wedding day, green eyes full of hope, and a letter, still sealed. He tore it open. The letter was dated April 16th, 2013. "Julian, I don't know if this will reach you. Claudia said you were traveling. I had to leave. You wouldn't believe me. I'm not asking for anything, just that you think of us kindly. I'm going to try to do this on my own. The girls will know you, even if only in stories. M. The girls. He looked again. There were more letters, 11 in total, all marked with forwarding stamps and return to sender. His chest ached. Claudia. She had always hated Marisol, thought she was a threat, said she was too ordinary for a Carrington. He opened another envelope. Inside was a photo. Marisol in a hospital bed, 4 swaddled newborns in her arms. Their names scrawled on the back: Elia, Sage, Mira, Luna, born 7:16 a.m. Miracle girls. Julian's hands trembled. They weren't street children. They weren't random. They were his. The next morning, Julian traded his tailored coat for a muted hoodie and scarf. He returned to the Brooklyn Street corner, heart pounding like a drum. They were there, arranging bouquets. Elia was giving orders. Sage was organizing the display. Mira adjusted ribbon lengths, while Luna handed a single daisy to a woman with a baby. Julian stood across the street and watched. Their movements, their voices, their energy, Elia's posture, Marisol's, Sage's narrowed eyes, his own, Mira's focus, his mother's, and Luna, sweet, quiet, smiling at strangers with hope that hadn't yet been crushed. A man knocked over one of their buckets. Julian instinctively stepped forward but stopped. Elia picked it up calmly. "It's okay," she told Mira. "We'll make another bouquet." They had no adult with them, no coats that fit, no gloves that covered all their fingers. He followed them, carefully from a distance, when they packed up, through side streets, down alleys, across 3 blocks, until they turned into a crumbling red brick building, Hope Harbor Women and Children's Shelter. Julian stayed outside, eyes wide. The truth was no longer a theory. It was alive. 4 living girls, his daughters, and they had no idea who he was. Julian adjusted the collar of his worn hoodie, heart thudding as he stepped into the front office of Hope Harbor. The air smelled faintly of instant coffee and old paper. A wall-mounted corkboard displayed children's drawings, many of them featuring flower stands, green eyes, and 4 little girls with identical smiles. A receptionist gave him a quick glance. "Can I help you?" "Yes, I'm here about the volunteer posting. Name's James Whitmore." Julian wasn't used to lying, at least not like this, but truth was a luxury he couldn't yet afford. The receptionist buzzed a small device. "Wait here. Miss Abernathy handles new volunteers personally." Within moments, a stout woman with weathered features and eyes that missed nothing appeared in the doorway. "You're the one who called yesterday?" "I am." Her gaze narrowed. "Follow me." Ruth Abernathy's office was as practical as her cardigan, cluttered, lived in, and surprisingly warm. "James Whitmore," she repeated, glancing at the clipboard. "Background check was clean. Says here you sold a startup and want to give back." Julian nodded. "I'm between things. Thought maybe I could help with tutoring, meals, maintenance, whatever you need." Ruth leaned back. "Most men who wander in here have something to prove or something to hide. Which are you?" He paused. "A little of both, probably." Her eyes flicked to a framed photo of the quadruplets sitting atop a stack of alphabet blocks. "You saw them on the corner, didn't you?" Julian's voice softened. "Yes, they're cautious with strangers, and I'm worse." Ruth folded her arms. "But we need all the help we can get. Dinner shifts in 20. Don't try. Anything clever." Julian gave a slight bow. "Wouldn't dream of it." Later that week, Julian found himself hunched over a folding table outside the shelter, elbows deep in buckets of cold water and carnations. "Mr. James, you're doing it wrong again," Elia said, tugging a daisy stem from his hand. "You have to crisscross the greenery, or it all collapses." "Ah, structural integrity," he muttered. "Like building a tower," she added, not realizing the irony. Julian blinked. Sage eyed him with suspicion from behind a crate. Mira quietly arranged ribbons, while Luna offered him a single sunflower. "It's kind of crooked," she admitted, "but it makes people smile." Julian smiled back. "It works." They packed up for the day, trudging toward the corner with practiced rhythm. He carried the heaviest bucket without being asked. Mira handed him an extra scarf. "Your ears get red," He laughed. Noted. As the girls began selling, Julian watched as an elderly woman tried to haggle. Sage stepped forward. The price isn't negotiable. Flowers don't grow for free. The woman blinked. All right then. She paid full price. Julian raised an eyebrow. Remind me never to negotiate with you. Sage gave a half smile. Smart choice. That evening, while wiping down counters in the shelter kitchen, Julian asked casually, "So, where are their parents?" Ruth looked up from sorting food donations. "Their mother's name is Marisol. She's in prison. Petty theft." Julian nearly dropped a saucepan. "For what?" he asked, breath caught. "Stole peanut butter and bread from a bodega during lockdown. Girls hadn't eaten in 2 days." He gripped the counter. Ruth misread his reaction. "You shocked a judge sent her away for that?" "I'm more shocked she ended up here at all." "She tried everything," Ruth continued. "Held 3 jobs before the pandemic. Always paid rent. Then it all fell apart. She tried to make it work for those girls. Never begged, never broke, until she did. Even then, she apologized to the store manager." Julian stared at the wall, his knuckles white. "I used to think poverty was bad luck," Ruth said. "But what Marisol got was a punishment." "What about their father?" Ruth's jaw tensed. "He denied them, said it wasn't possible. Marisol never talks about him. But the girls, they wonder." Julian swallowed. "They ever met him?" "No." He stared at the stack of dishes. "Maybe someday they will." The next day, the girls returned from school, changed into mismatched clothes, and began prepping for the flower stand. Julian waited by the gate, his scarf already looped. He felt something press into his palm. It was Luna. "A gift," she whispered. "A small blue marble. For your pocket, in case you need magic." He knelt to meet her eyes. "That's the best kind of magic." "Luna!" Elia called. "Let's go!" As they crossed the street, Sophie trailed behind, eyeing Julian. "You keep watching us," she said flatly, "like you're looking for something." Julian hesitated. "Maybe I am." "Are you a spy?" He blinked. "Would you believe I'm terrible at spying?" She narrowed her eyes. "Then why do your eyes look like ours?" Julian froze. Elia called again, and Sophie broke the moment. But Julian knew. The clock was ticking. They were starting to see him, not as a stranger, but as something more. The fluorescent lights of Dr. Langston's office buzzed overhead as Julian sat in the same seat he'd occupied 10 years earlier. Only this time, the air felt heavier, almost accusing. Dr. Langston adjusted his glasses, nervously flipping through Julian's old medical files. "Mr. Carrington, your record stated severe oligospermia, not sterility." Julian's voice was quiet but cold. "And yet you told me it was impossible." "Not unlikely. Impossible." The doctor shifted in his chair. "At the time your sister requested clarity, she said ambiguity would worsen your marriage troubles." Julian's jaw tightened. "She asked you to lie." Langston hesitated. "She framed it as compassion. And you signed off on ruining lives." Langston looked down. "It was a grave error. I see that now." Julian stood. "You don't get to apologize to me. You'll make a statement. And if you refuse, my attorneys will be in touch." He didn't wait for a response as he walked out, fury simmering beneath the surface. Ruth sat across from Julian in the shelter office, an old box resting on the table between them. "These were never meant for me," Ruth said. "Marisol wrote them to you." Julian opened the first envelope, fingers trembling. Inside, a faded photograph, Marisol holding 4 tiny infants, her face both radiant and exhausted. On the back, in looping handwriting, "They all have your eyes." The second letter was smudged with what could only be tears. "I don't care what the test said. These are your daughters, Julian. They need you." Julian read in silence for nearly 20 minutes, the weight of every word building in his chest. Ruth finally broke the quiet. She mailed dozens over the years. They were returned, marked refused or unknown address. "Claudia controlled your mailroom, didn't she?" He nodded. "She made sure I never saw a single word." Ruth looked at him with a mix of anger and sympathy. "Now you know. What will you do with it?" Julian folded a letter carefully. "Start making it right." That afternoon, Julian followed the girls from a distance as they set up their flower stand on their usual corner. The temperature had dropped, and Mira's hands shook slightly as she tied ribbon around a bouquet. A teenage boy bumped into Luna, nearly knocking her over. Before Julian could move, Sage stepped between them, arms crossed, eyes blazing. "Apologize," she snapped. The boy blinked. "I didn't. You touched my sister. Say sorry." Julian watched as the boy mumbled an apology and backed off, embarrassed. The girls returned to their task as if nothing happened. Elia handed a finished bouquet to an elderly woman, thanking her politely. Mira handed Luna a scarf. Sage kept scanning the crowd like a soldier. Julian swallowed hard. These weren't just kids. They were warriors in miniature, hardened by necessity, shaped by absence, and he had been absent. As the day wound down, the girls began packing up. Julian bent to help, careful not to overstep. Luna approached him with a small bunch of wild daisies tied with mismatched twine. "This one's for you," she said shyly. Julian blinked. "For me?" She nodded. "You help and don't ask for anything. That means something." He took the flowers gently, unable to speak for a moment. Sage hovered behind Luna, arms crossed. "Don't get comfortable." "I'm not," Julian said. "But thank you." He watched as the girls walked ahead, the twins flanking Elia like a protective unit. The daisy in his hand trembled. It wasn't just a flower, it was a door beginning to open. That night, Julian stood in his penthouse, the city glittering below. He stared at the daisies now in a glass beside his bed. Next to them, Marisol's letter lay open. "They cry less when I remind them that their father is strong. I told them he builds towers, that one day they'll see his name on the sky and know he loved them, even if he didn't know them." Julian pressed the letter to his chest, his shoulders shaking. The emotion he had buried beneath contracts, acquisitions, and silence broke free like a flood. He had not only lost a wife, he had missed their first steps, their first words, every scraped knee and storybook. Night. He had left them in a world that expected them to break, and still they hadn't. He had. Julian waited outside the shelter's office, shifting his weight nervously from foot to foot. The air smelled faintly of bleach and old fabric, familiar now after weeks spent volunteering. When Ruth opened the door and waved him in, her sharp eyes studied him with suspicion. "You've been holding something back," she said before he spoke. "Spill it." Julian sat. "I'm not who I said I was." She didn't flinch. "I know." He blinked. "You knew?" "I suspected. No former CEO walks in off the street to serve soup and carry flower buckets unless he's chasing ghosts." Julian inhaled. "They're my daughters, Ruth. All 4 of them." The words landed like a stone between them. Ruth's face didn't change. "You sure?" "I've done the math. I've seen the resemblance, and there's more. Letters Marisol sent me, dozens. I never received them. Claudia, my sister, she intercepted them. She lied to me about everything." Ruth leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "And now what? You play hero, ride in with money and promises." "No," Julian said quietly. "I want to be their father. For real, present, accountable. I want to help Marisol. I want to rebuild what I destroyed." Ruth nodded slowly. "Then prove it, stay, be consistent, and when the time comes, tell them the truth yourself." Carrington Tower, Claudia's penthouse office. The moment she saw the folder on her assistant's desk, something in her chest turned to ice. A photo paperclip to the top showed Julian, dressed down, carrying flower buckets, walking with 4 identical auburn-haired girls. "No," she whispered. She flicked through the reports. Hope Harbor Shelter, Marisol's prison record, Julian's daily visits. Claudia's carefully spun web was unraveling. She picked up her phone. "Gerald, I need you to contact Family Services. Tell them we've got a situation. Children at risk of media exploitation. Push for emergency custody." "Review. And Marisol Vega," Claudia's voice sharpened. "Make sure any attempt at early release is blocked. We'll protect the Carrington name, no matter the cost." Julian sat cross-legged in the shelter courtyard, helping Mira arrange daisies into a chipped vase. Luna was humming, sketching nearby. Elia sorted through yesterday's sales. Then Sophie approached, flanked by Emma. Both wore unreadable expressions. "You look like us," Sophie said bluntly. "Why?" Julian froze. Emma folded her arms. "And your eyes. They're the same as ours. Even your hands." "I told you," Julian said slowly. "Some people just resemble others. Coincidence." Sophie squinted. "But you said you didn't know about flowers. Now you know all our favorite kinds." Emma added, "You come every day. You know our schedules. And Ruth trusts no one, but she trusts you." Julian's throat dried. "Sometimes people care deeply even before they can explain why." The girls glanced at each other. "If you're hiding something," Emma said, voice like flint, "you better stop. We've had enough lies." Julian said nothing, his silence louder than any answer. Riker's Island loomed behind fogged glass. Julian sat at the plastic booth, phone to his ear, heart hammering in his chest. Then she appeared, Marisol, thinner, paler, but her presence remained luminous. She froze mid-step. "Julian," she said through the receiver. Her voice cracked. "It's me," he said. "I saw them. Elia, Mira, Sage, Luna." Marisol sat slowly, eyes guarded. "So now you believe me." "I never stopped loving you," Julian whispered, "but I didn't believe. Claudia showed me reports, said it was impossible. She made it impossible," Marisol said bitterly. "She stole every letter I wrote to you. Do you know what it's like to give birth alone? To raise 4 girls while the father they deserve grows richer by the minute?" Julian bowed his head. "I came to say, I'm sorry. I want to help. With you, if you'll let me." Marisol blinked fast. "Then I'll still help if I say no, from a distance, but they deserve to know the truth." She studied him a long time. "Tell them then," she said finally. "Tell them who you are." That evening, Julian stood again in Ruth's office. The girls' laughter echoed faintly from the other side of the building. "I saw her," he said. "Marisol. She gave me permission." Ruth tapped her fingers on the desk. "Then we'll proceed." Julian looked up. "DNA testing. Yes, I'll give consent as their guardian," she said. "But on one condition. Anything. You tell them, all 4 of them, face to face. No half-truths, no deflections. And if they don't accept you, I'll still be here," Julian said, voice resolute. "Even if they never call me father." Ruth nodded once. "Then we begin." Carrington Tower was quiet at midnight, save for the tapping of Claudia's manicured nails against a crystal glass of scotch. She stood before the skyline, eyes locked on the city she'd shaped from behind the throne. A ping interrupted. A silence. An encrypted file arrived from her private investigator. Photos of Julian, the quadruplets, Marisol's prison file, Ruth's name, shelter records. Claudia exhaled through her nose and picked up her phone. "Diane, call Children's Protective Services. Tell them I have a case of neglect involving minors in an unlicensed shelter." She ended the call and turned to her desk, pulling a yellowed file from her locked drawer. Inside were altered medical records and a signed statement from a judge who owed her favors. "Let him try," she muttered. "I built the Carrington name. He won't dismantle it for a florist and 4 street girls." Julian sat in his office, no longer in his penthouse, but in a rented co-working space near Hope Harbor. Beside him sat Ruth and Alexandra Hemsworth, his formidable new attorney. Jenkins, his lead investigator, entered with a folder in hand. "We have it," Jenkins said, placing it gently on the table. "All of it." Julian opened it slowly. Dozens of Voon scans, medical lab memos, Claudia's email to Dr. Partridge, suggesting Julian's diagnosis should be simplified for his emotional well-being. Alexandra leaned forward. "This isn't simplification. This is deliberate medical fraud." Julian turned the page. Letters from Marisol, all stamped return to sender, all marked with Claudia's discreet mail-forwarding labels. Jenkins tapped the table. "We also found communication between Claudia and Judge Preston, the one who sentenced Marisol. Large donations, undisclosed meetings." Julian's jaw clenched. "She kept them from me," he whispered. "My children, my wife, my life." Alexandra's voice sharpened. "We move now. Judicial misconduct, falsification, custody interference. With this, we can challenge everything." Julian looked up, eyes cold. "Then we fight, and we win." The courtroom was hushed, sterile, hostile. Alexandra stood before the judge, composed and precise. "Your Honor, we are presenting evidence that the original sentence against Marisol Vega was not only excessive, but influenced by bias and corruption." Julian sat in the gallery, fingers clenched. Behind him, Ruth kept the girls occupied in the waiting room. Judge Whitmore adjusted his glasses. "You're accusing Judge Preston of misconduct." Alexandra handed over the file. "We have documentation of undisclosed financial contributions and a pattern of decisions disproportionately harsh against single mothers during the pandemic. Ms. Vega's case was a targeted injustice." Across the aisle, the state prosecutor paled. The judge flipped through the file. "And who's requesting this?" Julian rose. "I am. Julian Carrington. Marisol Vega is my ex-wife. The children, Elia, Mira, Sage, and Luna, are my daughters. I was kept from them through deception, and I intend to rectify that." A ripple passed through the courtroom. The judge eyed him warily. "This is highly irregular." Alexandra countered. "So was the original sentence." The judge looked down at the file. "Again, I'll review. You'll have my ruling in 48 hours. Hope Harbor's common room was warm, full of the smell of baked bread and drying laundry. Julian sat on the old couch, heart pounding, as Ruth gathered the girls. They sat in a semicircle. Elia serious, Sage guarded, Mira cautious, and Luna hopeful. "I need to tell you something," Julian began, hands folded. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." The girls were silent. "My name isn't just Mr. Julian. It's Julian Carrington. I'm your father?" A beat of stunned silence. "You what?" Sage said, voice sharp. Mira's eyes went wide. "But Mum said our dad didn't want us. She said he didn't believe we were real," Elia added, softly but piercingly. "I didn't," Julian admitted, pain thick in his voice. "I was wrong. I was manipulated, lied to, and I never saw the letters your mum sent. I didn't know until I saw you." "You've been here the whole time," Luna said quietly. "Watching." "Yes," he whispered. "I was afraid. I didn't deserve to say it until I could prove I meant it." Sage stood, arms crossed. "You think saying sorry fixes 9 years of nothing?" "No," Julian said, "but I'd give the rest of my life to earn your forgiveness." Elia looked at her sisters. "Did Mom know?" "I spoke with her," Julian said. "She gave me permission to tell you." Silence again. Then Luna stood and gently placed her daisy drawing in his lap. "That was for you. I think I knew." Carrington Tower, the private family library. Julian entered alone to find Claudia seated, sipping tea as if nothing had changed. "Tell me you're here to apologize," she said without looking up. "I'm here," Julian replied, "to end this." Claudia's gaze sharpened. "You're unraveling everything. The Carrington legacy, you mean your legacy, built on lies. You were infertile," she hissed. "You were unraveling, trusting her. I was manipulated by you. You intercepted Marisol's letters, paid off judges, lied to my doctors. Why?" Claudia rose, cold and furious. "Because you were too weak to protect what Father built. She would have ruined us." "They're my children, Claudia. And now you're going to throw it all away for them." "For her? I already did," Julian said quietly. "And it's the only thing I don't regret." He placed a manila envelope on the table. "You're removed from the board. Legal filings go public tomorrow. Alexandra's filing charges for judicial tampering. You're destroying your family name." Claudia spat. Julian turned. "To leave?" "No," he said. "I'm finally honoring it." The cold spring morning at Rikers Island was unusually bright. Julian stood just beyond the prison gates, fingers wrapped tightly around an envelope containing the final court order for Marisol's release. Weeks of legal pressure, media coverage, and exposure of judicial misconduct had finally broken through the system's walls. He heard the clank of the gate before he saw her. Marisol stepped out slowly, blinking against the sunlight. Her hair was pulled back into a simple braid, silver streaks glinting against her dark chestnut strands. Her posture was straighter than he expected, scarred but not broken. The moment she saw him, everything else vanished. She didn't speak, neither did he. But when 4 small voices screamed, "Mom!" behind him, the silence shattered. Elia, Sage, Mira, and Luna barreled past Julian and flung themselves into their mother's arms. Marisol dropped to her knees, laughter and sobs tangled together as she held them. "I missed you so much," she whispered, kissing each forehead, her voice breaking. Julian hung back, unsure if he was part of this reunion. But then Luna turned and reached for his hand. "Come on, Dad." It was the first time any of them had said the word aloud. He swallowed hard and stepped forward, not as an outsider, not as a mistake, but as their father. That afternoon, they stood outside a modest walk-up apartment in Williamsburg. Nothing extravagant, no doorman, no marble floors. But it was safe, and it was theirs. Marisol turned the key and opened the door to freshly painted walls, warm wooden floors, and a bouquet of wildflowers waiting on the windowsill. The girls squealed and scattered in every direction, claiming bunk beds, investigating the kitchen, giggling over the bathtub. Julian handed her the deed. "It's in your name," he said quietly. "No strings, just freedom." Marisol stared at the document, then at him. "Why this place?" "It's near the community center," he said, "and close to the art supply store you used to love." Her eyes softened. "You remembered that?" "I remember everything now." They sat on the worn couch together while the girls ran wild. Marisol's hand brushed his. "I'm not ready to forget everything that happened," she said, "but I'm willing to see what we can grow from here." Julian nodded. "So am I." 2 weeks later, Claudia Carrington's world collapsed. Judge Crawford had been removed from the bench after Julian's legal team exposed a pattern of bias and unethical collusion. Claudia's communications, wire transfers, backroom deals, confidential interference were now front-page news. Julian made a single brief statement to the press. "The Carrington legacy is not built on lies. We don't protect power, we protect people." When the authorities arrived at her penthouse, Claudia didn't resist. Her exit was elegant, even as her empire fell. As she passed Julian in the lobby of Carrington Tower for the last time, her eyes locked on his. "You've ruined everything." "No," Julian replied. "I've finally started building something worth protecting." Her silence was her last act of defiance. He watched her go without satisfaction, only solemn resolve. The cycle of control was over. The grass in Central Park rippled beneath a spring breeze. Balloons bobbed from folding tables, and 4 identical cakes sat beside trays of homemade snacks. Elia wore a paper crown she'd made herself. Sage directed the guests like a drill sergeant. Mira floated between art stations. Luna handed out slices of cake like they were magic tokens. It was their 10th birthday. Ruth, now semi-retired, gave hugs and managed the guest list. Teachers from their school came, neighbors brought flowers. Julian manned the grill, laughing as Mira painted stars on his cheeks. From a distance, Marisol watched them with tearful eyes. "They're happy," she said. Julian joined her, handing over a lemonade. "They are," he agreed. "We all are, I think." Marisol nodded. "You've become something I never expected, Julian." He chuckled. "A grill master?" She smiled. "A father." That evening, as twilight settled over the park and the last guests drifted away, Marisol and Julian sat alone on a bench beneath blooming cherry blossoms. The girls were sprawled on picnic blankets, giggling as they sorted through presents. "You never asked for forgiveness," she said. "I didn't think I deserved it." "You didn't, but you earned something else. Trust." Julian stared at his daughters, Ilya mimicking his hand gestures, Sage pretending to argue like a lawyer, Mira humming as she drew, Luna pointing out constellations. "I thought legacy was built in buildings and headlines," he said softly. "But it's in them, in every stubborn, brilliant, unbreakable part of them." Marisol leaned against him, not in romance, but in shared survival. "They'll change the world," she whispered. "We already did." Julian replied. "We just didn't know it until now." As the first stars emerged, the family sat together beneath the soft petals of a new season, proof that even shattered things could bloom again. What if the truth you've built your life on was a lie, crafted by the person you trusted most? Julian Carrington thought he was sterile, incapable of creating a legacy beyond business deals and headlines, but 4 little girls selling flowers on a Brooklyn corner shattered that illusion and revealed a family he never knew he had. A decade of silence, a wrongful imprisonment, a sister's betrayal, and yet despite all the brokenness, love found a way to bloom through concrete. Would you have had the courage to face what he did, to admit the years you lost can't be returned, but still fight for every moment ahead? What would you have done in Julian's place? If this story moved you, if it made you question the meaning of family, truth, or redemption, share your thoughts in the comments. What moment hit you the hardest? Was it Julian's breakdown, Marisol's strength behind bars, or the moment the girls called him Dad? We'd love to hear your insights, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We bring stories like this, emotional, powerful, unforgettable, every week, and your support helps these truths reach more hearts.